So tonight, this is going to be fun because I'm really curious to see what comes up. And I'm going to ask you all to be very interactive because it's just going to be me tonight. I don't have a guest. So if you're not interactive, I'm going to have to just sit here and stare at this camera and talk to myself. And that's going to suck. So if you are ready and you want to be interactive, just pop into the chat. Yes. So I know that you're with me. So tonight, we're going to talk about speaking. And I don't want you to jump off if you're not a public speaker or a teacher or an educator or someone that has to stand up in front of groups, because really this is about how do we communicate, and especially how do we communicate from the heart, because I feel like that's the huge difference maker. I didn't say that very well, but cool. We got a couple of people saying yes. Awesome. Kayla, Rebecca, Michelle, Vonda are all... oh, sweet. We got some Scotland vibes from Kaylee, Jane, Dickey with us. So thanks for being here. So here's what I would like to ask you first. If you could do me a favor and just pop into the chat, what makes a great speaker to you? And this is completely up to you, because a lot of this is subjective and a lot of it is very personal. Hey, Shirley, welcome. So happy to have you here as always. So we're talking about presentation and how we communicate and how we express ourselves more from a heart-centered place. So type into the chat, what do you feel like makes a great speaker or educator, or even just a great communicator? You know, maybe it's not even someone that's standing on a stage or something like that. Cool, we've got some stuff coming in. Hello, Luis from Mexico. Saludos. Kaylee Jane's saying eye contact, confidence. Kimberly saying Michelle's bringing to the table being able to connect with your audience. Very cool. Yes, we're going to definitely talk about that. Connection to audience through authenticity, Michelle is saying. Kathleen Ford is saying confidence. Nice. Getting over the fear to be in front of the stage. Yes, Wanda, we are going to talk about that too a bit, is how do we get over that fear? Because it's real. Like they say that public speaking is the number one fear of most people, and that's above death by fire. So there's a reason that the nerves kind of come up. Wendy's saying hi, just being a communicator. Awesome. Ooh, Rebecca, nice. Great teacher is able to listen as well as give feedback. Very cool. And Shirley, yes, passionate about that. When someone is genuine and confident, Jen is saying, awesome. So speaking and communicating well is one part actual skill and one part authenticity, in my opinion. Let me say that. That's my opinion. And most of what we learn as great communicators is skill set, because you can learn to be a great communicator. Not all of us are gifted with the ability to just naturally be able to speak in front of people. And let's face it, there's a lot of us that don't even necessarily feel comfortable speaking to more than one person at a time. You know, even if we're in a group of like 3 or 4 people at a dinner table with people we love, how many of you out there are kind of the last person to speak up, right? And it's not necessarily because you don't want to. It's just because it's like, well, everyone else is talking, I'm going to give them their space. And so for some of us, it is much more comfortable for us to speak, whether it's in front of a 2,000 person audience or whether it's just sitting at the dinner table with our family. Shirley saying you can sense when someone is just phoning a talk in. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. And I think that's that second piece that we want to talk about, which is that sense of authenticity. Where is the message coming from? Is it actually coming from that person, or are they just kind of regurgitating something to you? We can't do everything at one time, though. So we're going to first talk about that technical aspect of skill set. Then we're going to talk a little bit more about authenticity. And I want to give you a couple of techniques that you can use. And again, this is if you're just preparing a meeting for your staff at the salon, if it's you're standing on stage in front of 100,000 people, if you are just doing some type of video for your social media, or even just having a conversation with someone you love, there is kind of a structure that you can follow to make sure that what you offer is complete. Okay, so I'm going to offer that to you towards the end. Danielle's saying relatability. You need to click with someone. Yeah, I excelled in my course the way I did because of my trainer. Awesome, Daniel. Thank you for that. And, great point to this too is that every person's authenticity isn't necessarily going to click with you, right? Sarah's saying authenticity too. So different people's version of authenticity is going to connect with you in different ways, right? So for some of you, my energy and my authenticity, it's like, oh yeah, I can really vibe with Andrew. Oh, we're cool. Like we can, you could learn from me quite well. There are some of you out there that don't enjoy my style of authenticity. And maybe you might say, oh, he's a little too casual. He talks too much, he over explains things. And, that feedback is great because we can start to adjust maybe how we are communicating. But at some point, we kind of also have to come back to that place of, well, this is kind of who I am. And I have to accept that not everyone's going to like that style, right? Kimberly, I like what you're saying, a feeling that your words and messages matter and have worth. That's awesome. Yeah, Vonda, encouragement too. So I'm going to bring up, I did a presentation for a group just recently that I want to share with you. And you're going to get the mini version of it. But I did this presentation, and it was a 4-session coaching session for their presenters and their teachers. And we broke it down into 3 categories. We broke it down into developing the story, capturing the story, and telling the story, because that's really what we're doing as a presenter or a teacher, and even just as a communicator to someone personally, we're telling a story. And so we want to create that story in a certain way. So developing the story, we're going to go into this lesson planning process here in just a little bit, because I think this is a really important part of it. The lesson planning process helps us to develop the story in a way that we can deliver the message in a way that is easy to understand, and it's something that also can be consumed, because people can really only consume so much information. I am a habitual over-explainer. No, you, Andrew? Really? Yeah, I know there's plenty of you here. I see you, the people that are here with me, and on a regular basis. And yes, I like to over-explain things. So lesson planning is really key for me because it keeps me from going way off track and over-explaining and getting down lost on little rabbit holes. And when you're developing the story, it's really about refining the message. There was something that we always taught presenters at Paul Mitchell the School, which was FWMM. So it's FWMM. Here, I'll even write it on here. FWMM. So what FWMM means is fewer words, more meaning. And again, this is a huge challenge for me. How many of you out there share that challenge with me, that you tend to oversay and over-explain everything with way too many words? Just throw it in the chat if that's you, if you're with me. So we had this thing in Paul Mitchell School called fewer words, more meaning. And basically it was like, how few words can you put into your presentation and get your point across? And can those few words have so much impact and so much meaning that you don't have to say everything else? You don't have to say all these other little things to tie it together. Central Illinois filmmakers is saying yes. Danielle's saying, ha, me. Michelle, you're not an over-explainer, Michelle. Kimberly's saying yes. Shirley's saying, oh yeah. Hannah is saying right here, I do that. Awesome. And again, like, I'm kind of setting that up from a standpoint of, being a presenter or a teacher or educator, but this happens in, just casual conversation too. And the last part of really developing the story is making sure that you're fitting the needs of the platform that you're on. So I know when I show up here at Samvia, most of the people that are out there, most of you that are watching, I'd say probably 80%, you're hairdressers or you're salon owners, or you're in the salon industry somehow. And so for a lot of what I develop here, I make sure that the message that I'm building is appropriate to hairdressers, that it would fit to hairdressers. And because I know that some of you aren't, like I know there's a handful of you watching that pop in each week that aren't hairdressers. And so I want to make sure that there's also something here for you that doesn't just feel like, oh, this guy only talks to hairdressers. So I need to know my audience. I also need to know the time frame, because This particular class, talking about being an authentic educator, talking about speaking from the heart, this can be a 4-day program, right? Like this could really go incredibly in depth. Just this one page developing a story could be a whole class, right? And so I have to look at my time frame and say, what can I fit within that time frame that's still going to have some impact, that you are still going to walk away after the 45 minutes we spend together and feel like it was worth your time. The platform is also really important, especially right now, because there isn't as much. It's starting to ramp back up. We're starting to get more live education, but so much education, so much presentation, so much conversation happens here on the camera, right? Zoom calls, presentations like this on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram, digital classes. And so we kind of have to know the platform too, because what I do here on camera doesn't necessarily work the same way in a live classroom. What I do in that live classroom doesn't necessarily translate here to the camera. So I also have to know the platform and create my story so that it fits that platform. If this is making sense so far, pop in making sense into the chat. Wendy's saying, I find some clients do love that. It's a balance. Yeah, some people love that, like, that you're a talker and that you love to explain. Melissa says depends on the voice. Rebecca's saying, as a public speaker, I make a general outline and try to make it relevant. Awesome. Perfect. Love that, Rebecca. Danielle's saying she is a beauty therapist, but I really want to do hairdressing. Sweet. Well, you're in the right place. And I think you've got a lot of people here that would tell you that's a great sense. Awesome. So we're making sense so far. Great. So let's go to capturing the story. So this specifically is more for when we're doing digital. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here because this isn't really the focus. But in that capturing the story, the point here is that we want to make sure that what we are using to capture the story is telling the story in the way that we want to. And I have this great friend, Doreen, who was actually on Wellness Wednesday about 1.5 years ago. And she's not even necessarily a presenter for this kind of stuff, but she's been an actress. She is an incredible singer. And she said something to me one time that really kind of knocked me on my butt. And it was so simple because I was talking to her about a class like this that I was going to do. And she's like, when it comes to video, what is in your background tells me a story about what's important to you. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, because she was sharing that from the perception of the person watching the video, because she's usually the person watching the video, not the person on the video. And so I thought that was so impactful, because we do have to recognize that everything about what you right now are seeing on this screen tells you part of the story. It gives you part of the story. So what is sitting here in my background tells you what I value. Also, even the way that it's lit tells or delivers a certain aspect to the feeling of a video. If I have a strong light from the side and really shadowed over here, it's going to make it a little bit more moody, a little bit more serious. But because I want this to be very engaging, I guess that's a good word, I have my studio lit very brightly, and it's very evenly lit so that it looks more bright and inviting. So the lighting that you do, I've got a great camera with a really nice microphone on it, because I want you to be able to see me clearly. I want you to be able to hear me clearly, because the tone of my voice tells you part of the story, right? So sound quality is super important. So again, I'm not going to spend too much time here because it's not really the point of tonight, but I wanted to share that with you. And then telling the story. And this is where we really start to show our authenticity. And we're going, yeah, no creepy glowing eyes, right, Shirley? Danielle says, good. You like that theory? Deborah's with me. Good. Making sense. And yes, Vonda, sometimes less is more. Usually less is more, actually. So when we're talking about telling the story, this is your actual performance. So you have your verbal aspect of telling the story. And this is the sound of your voice, your breath, your volume, the intonation that you use, the inflection, and all of these things are a part of how you tell a story. So if I kind of talk to you like this, I just kind of talk at one flat level, and I don't really raise or lower my voice, and I just stay at one level. What's that doing? What story is that telling? Or if I get really close up to the camera and I just kind of talk really quietly and I pause, what's that telling you about the story? Or if I kind of bring my voice up and I get really excited and I let it go up and down and up and down, what does that do to the story? And what's really important here is authenticity is what's really key. This was a huge learning lesson for me when I first started working with Sam. So if you've been here on this channel before, then Wendy says, or Melissa says, creepy. Yes, it can get creepy if I'm real close to the camera. But one of the things that I learned when I first started working for Sam, when he first invited me to share the stage at the Chicago ABS show, I think this was 2014, somewhere around in there. But when he first invited me to come and share his stage, we were kind of trying out, like, see if I was going to be part of the team or not. I was really nervous because you all know Sam. Like, his energy is way out here. Like, he's got this big, huge, powerful energy. And how many of you have seen Sam on stage? Just type in me into the chat if you have actually seen Sam on stage. Not just here on video, but on stage. The dude is like bigger than life. You know, he is bouncing around the stage. I mean, this guy has like cut hair hanging from a trapeze, right? Shirley's seen him. So Wendy has, awesome. Melissa has. So you all know what I'm talking about. Karen, Celeste, awesome. A lot of you have seen him, Vonda. And so this guy's huge on stage, right? And here comes little me. I'm like, all right, so, well, Sam, you know, I'm talking to him backstage before I go on. I'm like, you know, I'm going on right after you. And I'm just pretty calm. Like, I'm pretty chill. And he's like, that's what I want. He's like, I want you to be authentic. I want you to be Andrew. If you get up there and try and be Sam, no one's going to believe you. No one's going to trust you because it's not authentic. It's not who you truly are. So that authenticity of being who we are, when Sam got off stage and I stepped up and I kind of started into my part, which was a little bit more calm. It was a little bit more, you know, kind of precision haircutting kind of conversation. The audience didn't leave. They actually stayed, which I was really excited for. And I could see Sam and one of his business partners, Kurt, in the back, and they're watching me up on stage, and they're like talking to each other back there. And of course, the little voice in my head's going, "Oh gosh, I'm bombing. They don't like it. All these things." But what they shared with me afterwards is what they were saying is, "Oh wow, this is great," because it's almost like that yin and yang energy is, you know. Kurt always called it that Sam was the hot and I was the cool. So it was like Sam would get everyone kind of like burning and hot. And then I'd come in and I'd be like, all right, let's bring it down a notch, you know, and cool it down. And Karen, yeah, variety is good. Sandy, yeah, simmer down now. Right, exactly. And Shirley, I think that's the really key part. Because if I jumped up on stage and tried to be like Sam is, if I was trying to be that Energizer bunny and bouncing around and throwing hair around, people would be like, who is this guy? Like, get this joker off stage. And unfortunately, I've seen that in some young hairdressers that have had that person. And I've actually been that person. I've totally shown up inauthentically because I was trying to be like my mentor. I was trying to show up like my mentor. Also, our body is a part of the story, right? And so it's how we move our body. It's how we inflect our body. And of course, a huge part of it is this, right? This is part of our body. And so what's happening on my face is part of telling the story. So even if I'm moving my voice up and down, but my face is like this, you know, you're getting a certain message from it. Oh, thanks, Melissa. I appreciate you. So our body really is part of what tells the story. And especially here, like this is a small frame. And so how I move and how I move my head, how I move my face, and, you know, bringing hands into frame. These are all things that help to support the story. Part of this particular presentation that I'm sharing with you was specifically for hairdressers. And so, of course, demonstration is a big part of what we do. This was huge when I first started working for Sam. Surely droopy dog look doesn't inspire, right? But a big part of what we have to learn as hairdressers is where to put our body in relationship to the audience so that the body is telling the story of what we're doing, but it's also not getting in the way of your ability to actually see. So that's huge. And I think a big part of our telling the story is showing up as our true self. Now, this might, and again, we all kind of have different opinions on these kinds of things. But there was a person that I really looked up to that was on stage, and I was a little surprised at their language choice because there were F-bombs and there were all these, kind of words that I was like, wow, like they're throwing down on a pretty big stage with lots of people in this audience. And it was kind of surprising to me. And I will say in that moment, because of my upbringing as a presenter and as a teacher, I was always told you never say those kind of words. And so my judgment kind of kicked in. But what I recognized is that person was kind of building a relationship of authenticity. And later on, I saw that really they were showing up as their most authentic self, their true self. They had gotten to a place in their career that they were like, I'm just going to show up as me. And the people that want to be part of that, they're going to be part of that. And if it's not their thing, that's okay too. And I don't necessarily, like I said, I don't want to necessarily inflect my opinion on whether I think that's a good thing, bad thing, right thing, or wrong thing. But for them, it was so important for them to just show up as their true person, as their authentic self, that it was kind of okay to them that it might mean that they might lose some audience because they wanted to refine that audience. Now, I think each person has to make that decision for themselves. I personally do adapt the language choices that I make if I'm sitting on the couch with my wife or if I'm sitting here in front of the camera. I don't do it at a level that I feel that it is inauthentic, right? I don't necessarily change myself. I just make sure that because I want to have a very universal audience, I choose my words in a way that I'm not going to be exclusive. Now, this last one, Melissa, I love that. That takes guts. I mean, boss. Surely, yes, it's just a thing. Yeah, and to your point, Rosie, I see your comment. I would be offended, and if you're up on stage, you should take responsibility on your words because words do have power. Absolutely. And so I think that is the place that person was coming from, is that they kind of wanted to use those words to inflect power. And like I said, I think for each of us, we have to put into perspective what's best for us. And I totally feel what you're saying there, Rosie. So this last one, pre-show. This is so important. And this is something that I was never taught as a teacher and a presenter, honestly. There was that preparation phase, but I wasn't really taught what do you do right before you step on stage. And we had mentioned that we're going to talk about stage fright a little bit. This is probably one of the most important parts of stage fright. Stage fright doesn't necessarily go away. I know a few people that I don't know that they necessarily get stage fright anymore. They feel pretty comfortable on stage, but I can tell you from my own experience, it hasn't gone away for me. There's always still that first few minutes that I have to get myself comfortable. It's when the camera first turns on, when I first walk out on stage, when I first step in front of my audience, even when I first start a conversation with someone that might be, a very personal conversation, but it might have some intensity to it. There's that first moment. And so what we have to do is we have to get ourselves in the right space. And that's a lot about nervous system. In the nervous system, we've talked about this if you've watched my breath work exercises. In the nervous system, we can use breathing to really help us with this. I just did this thing on my Instagram. Was that yesterday? I think I put it on there. And it's just short breath holds. It's one of the quickest ways to get yourself back into the body and get your nervous system grounded. You can all try this. So all you do to do this is you do a few natural breaths in and out through the nose. You don't have to change your breathing pattern at all. Just sit and take a few in and out through the nose. After you exhale, inhale, the second or third breath, after you exhale, reach up and pinch your nose and count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Release your nose and then just return to natural breathing in and out through the nose. After you've taken 2 or 3 more breaths, just reach up. After the exhale, pinch your nose, hold for 5 seconds, and then release and do 2 or 3 natural breaths. And just as I'm kind of talking, try that out, at home. If you're driving or something, maybe that might not be the best thing. But these short breath holds are one of the fastest and easiest ways to get the nervous system under control and get you back into your body. Because a lot of what happens with stage fright is it's all up here. It's the stories. It's the stories of what are they going to think? What if I screw up? It's showing up and being seen. That's actually what the fear is. So speaking in front of an audience isn't necessarily the fear. The fear is when I do speak in front of the audience, I'm putting myself at risk. I'm putting myself out there to be seen for who I truly am, potentially, which is a very, very scary thing to expose ourselves in that way. So doing these breathing exercises before you step out on stage, it doesn't necessarily get rid of the nerves, but it helps to get you into a place so that you can step up and you can work through the nerves. It's that feel the fear and do it anyway kind of mindset. Vocal warm-ups are super important too, because if you step onto a stage, especially like where you really need to project your voice, here in my studio, I still project a little bit louder than I do just in a natural conversation. So I still do my vocal warm-ups, which is really important because I'm going to be talking a lot. But especially if I'm going to be standing up on a stage or in a classroom where I have to project my voice out, it's kind of like going to the gym and lifting heavy weights without doing some kind of warm-up. You really risk damaging your vocal cords. So I'm working on some warm-ups. One of my favorite people that you can learn this from is Roger Love. He's got tons of books out there. He has this really affordable voice coaching workshop that you can do. So it's called Roger Love, just like it sounds. Demonstrate the vocal warm-ups, Lorraine. So some of them, he does a lot of singing warm-ups. So I'm not a good singer. I'm not good in tune, but you go, gug, 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 gug. And you do scales up and down with gug. You do gug. You do no. You do mum. So mum, 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 mum. You also, I do lip trills, which helps to loosen up the face, which this is a fun one. You go, so those are some of the vocal warm-ups. Also, of course, making sure that you have what you need at the ready, so checking your needs and supplies, and then really setting your intention. Something that Sammy told me a long time ago, and it's really stuck with me, is that a lot of nervousness too is a little bit selfish, because if we're focused on our audience and we're focused on their needs, then we're not as focused on and worried about ourselves, right? And so that's one of the things that I try to do right before I teach is really check in. What is my intention here? Is it to be seen? Is it to be heard? Is it about me? Or because that's what the little voice inside is going through right then, right? Like, oh, what if they hate me? What if they like me? What if I say this wrong? So I really need to check in, and I have to set my intention that this is for you. Like, I'm just the messenger. I'm just the vessel to help to share this information. So if my intention is pure, that I'm here for you, that really helps too with checking in on the nerves. Cool. So far, I'm going to kind of scale back because I know I missed a couple of comments, maybe potential questions in here. But if you have any questions so far and what I've shared so far, go ahead and pop it in the chat. As soon as I kind of review your questions here, then we're going to go into how to actually build the plan, how to build that lesson plan structure. I call it my game plan, and how to make sure you have everything in there. Rosie, yes. So there are some courses out there, because Rosie's asking, are there courses out there and to actually learn how to be a presenter? So the Redken Exchange has one called, oh my gosh, I can't remember it. It was called Center Stage, or it is called Center Stage. I apologize. Maybe one of the team can look that up for me. But Redken does actually offer something that is a live, hands-on class to learn how to be a better presenter. The other thing too, honestly, is I'm kind of giving you some of the tools right now. And to learn to be a better presenter, it's almost like everything else in life. It's do it and then step back and go, okay, what worked and what didn't work? Do it again. You can't become a better presenter without presenting. Of course, you want to make sure that you do get some of that training, Rosie. To your point, I've seen people that got thrown up on a stage really quickly in their career because they had gained a big following, maybe on social media, and they just kind of got thrown out on stage. And I've seen a few of those people kind of freak out when they stand up there because they don't necessarily have that training behind them on what to do once you're in front of that kind of audience. And since they had not had that experience in the past, if you don't have the training, you don't have the experience, we can't expect that person to know what to do up there. And that's definitely one of the benefits of working for a brand. If there's any of you out there that want to become a teacher, educator, presenter, working with the brands, one of the things I can really say that is very helpful with that is most of them have some type of training program on how to teach. At Paul Mitchell, the school, we had an entire program. We had an entire department that their sole purpose, and it was part of my department that I worked with, the sole purpose was to go teach people how to teach. Because it is a skill set. It's not just something that we're born with. Cool. I'm just kind of, like I said, I'm just kind of going back. I've got all your questions over here and your comments. So I'm just looking back through here, making sure I didn't miss anything. Shirley's asking, do you ever get hit by, oh, wow, this is going well. The audience is there with you and get sidetracked by the realization? Yes, kind of. I have to say that the thing that kind of gets me sidetracked more often is the story I start telling when I look at someone and their expression isn't telling me a story that I want to hear. So, and if some of you are teachers out there, you've probably experienced this. You kind of look around your room and there's someone kind of like this. I think they call it RBF, right? And in your mind, like, you're scanning your audience, oh, everyone's having a great time. And then you hit that one person and it's like, oh crap, what are they thinking? Do they hate me? Did I say something wrong? How can I get that person back engaged with me? And that's what tends to interrupt my flow. When really, most of the time, it's just that what I tell teachers now, because this comes up pretty often, is if they are still making eye contact with you, they are engaged. Even if this is kind of like, if they're still actually looking at you, they're with you. Because when people start to lose interest, that's when it's kind of more looking around the room, looking at their phone, doing everything else but being part of your class. So, cool. Oh, thanks, Lorraine. I appreciate that. Yes, Rosie, passion is huge. And here's the thing. This is the other thing that I often offer to young presenters that are just getting started. Your authenticity and your passion will always give you leeway with your presentation technical skills, but not the other direction, unfortunately. Not today. It used to be that if you stood on stage and you were really technically precise with your presentation skills, that was what people wanted. They wanted that kind of motivational speaker. I'm very precise. I use my hands in a very certain way. I walk to the 3 points on the stage really evenly. I connect with people in the audience in this certain pattern. Like all of these kind of technical processes that we're taught as presenters. If you did those things really well, you were considered a great presenter. Now, there's a completely different vibe from the audience. People want authenticity. They want the real you. And they'll actually be quite forgiving of the technical skills, the likes, the ums, the filler words. All of that stuff used to be sinful. And guess who got named one of the top presenters in the world? Brene Brown. And if you listen to Brene Brown, her technical speaking skills, especially a few years ago, from a technical standpoint, wasn't strong. There were lots of likes, there were ums, there were, odd pauses. She has a habit of doing this laugh thing that is almost like her filler word. And so her technical skills weren't what people were judging her on. It was her ability to be so real and so authentic with people. And I think that that's really what people are looking for. So I think that your passion and your authenticity, if that comes through, the likes, the ums, the stutters, the flubs in the technical process, I think you get a lot more of a pass with that if you're authentic, right? And even from the nerve standpoint, I know that a lot of people get so nervous that their voice literally shakes. But I don't know about you, when there's someone on stage and I can tell they're a new presenter, their nerves are high, their voice is shaking, but they're trying their best. You can tell it's coming from the heart. It now, to me, is almost endearing. Like I want to support that person even more then. And so I don't think we have to worry so much about, like I said, these kind of technical things. Yes, Rosie, very well said. I think, and you're right, I think a lot of people are looking for this, especially now. And I think this is why Sam has been, named the best educator in our industry so many times, because he doesn't talk over people's heads. There is a place for the super technical, really precision language. I love it. I love to get super dorky with haircutting. But really, most of the world, most of the audience wants that, Rosie. They want someone to speak to them in a way that it's like, hey, let's just sit down and have a conversation here. Let's be real. Let's use words that we can both agree on and understand. And let's talk more here, eye to eye. Whereas sometimes if you start to listen to someone that's very, very technical, very precise, for some of us, it feels like they're kind of talking way up here, and they're kind of talking down to us, right? Not that that's their intent. Let's be clear about that, but it can feel that way, right? So I'm going to give you just a quick overview because I realize we're getting a little bit long on time, but I do want to share one more thing with you here, because the lesson planning process is probably one of the most important and most valuable things that you can go through. And here's a really simple process. Basically, with any presentation, you have an open, you have a body, and you have a close, right? And there's certain things that need to go in each one of these. Within your opening, actually, we're going to go to body first, because I'm going to take you through it in the way that I actually build my presentations, and most people that I know build their presentations, which is you build the body first so that you can build your content first. Here is something that I was taught at Palm Beach School, and I think is very true. I've seen it time and time again. The human brain, the ability to retain information, you get 3 things within one presentation. So you can maybe do multiple presentations. Let's say you have a full day of education. Maybe you're a salon owner out there and you're doing a full day of stuff for your staff. That doesn't mean you can only have 3 things in that entire day, but you can only have 3 things at a time. And then there has to be like a closing to it, reset, start again. So the max you want to have within a presentation is an A, B, and C point. So these are your 3 key points that you might teach. And sometimes it might even just be 2 key points, especially let's say you're doing this to create a piece of content for your social media. This is exactly how I create content for social media too. So at most 3 key points. There's 3 main questions that you want to ask. What, why, and how. So for each key point, your what is what are you going to teach them? So what is the point? So my first key point today was the story process, right? I showed you, creating the story, capturing the story, and telling the story. So that was my first key point. So that's what I want to teach. Then the next question that we want to ask ourselves, because this really helps to build the content, is why. That's really what people want to know. Of course, they want to know, well, sorry, let me reverse and remove that sentence. People want the information, but there is a huge part of your audience that will not retain the information unless you give them the why behind it. So why is such an important key point. It's not for everyone, actually. There's certain learning types that actually don't really care as much about the why, but we won't go into that. And then the third thing that we want to set up is how. And this is how are you going to deliver it? So for my presentation, I had, okay, the what is, those 3 pieces of creating the story, capturing the story, telling the story. So I know that that's my what. Why is that important? Because it helps us to build a complete story and we can be more authentic through it. How I did that is through those PowerPoint presentation slides. So it gives us how we're actually going to deliver the information. You do that for all 3 of your key points. Now, what I encourage you to do is to keep this on one piece of paper. And the reason that I encourage you to do that is because it limits how much information you can put on here. And that is probably one of the biggest challenges in communication is too much content. No one can absorb that much content. No one. So we really need to go back to that old Paul Mitchell the School thing that I mentioned earlier, which is fewer words, more meaning. Once we get the body of the presentation built, we know what we're going to talk about, we know why it's important, we know how we're going to deliver it, then we can start to build our opening and our closing. Because in the opening, you want to have something here that is your attention getter. So this might be a question, it might be a story, it might be an experience. So if I'm in a live classroom, in that part, I want to start to get the community interactive. I did that in the very beginning. I don't know if you noticed, but I asked you some questions. I asked you if you would be interactive with me. That was part of me getting your attention and engaging the learner within you to make sure I was with you. I'm sorry, Wendy, I'm probably moving a little quick because I'm aware that I don't want to keep us too much longer, but you can always come back and rewatch this too. So within the opening, that first piece that you want to create here is something to just grab attention, and it should have something relevant to what the body of information that you're going to teach. The next step after you do your attention getter is you want to give yourself a little bit of an introduction, and sometimes we might swap these. So sometimes the intro might go first. Like today, my intro happened first. Hey guys, I'm Andrew Carruthers, blah, 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 blah. So intro happened first. Sometimes, especially on social media, putting the attention grabbing piece before the intro might be important. The intro might be not important if it is on your personal social, because people can see who and what you are right there on your social. So you might not even have to say, hey, I'm Andrew Carruthers, right? It really depends on the situation. Then I love this acronym also. The next step is what is in it for me. So this is what your audience really needs to know within the first few minutes of your presentation. Why do I want to sit here and listen to you? And again, remember, I'm not just talking about this from a standpoint of presenting or teaching into an audience. This is also like if you're going to be the head of a meeting, again, this is a great structure for you to build your meeting around because it has that same storytelling process to it. So what's in it for me should be something simple that they will understand. Why should I listen to you? Why should I be part of this meeting? Why should I be part of this class, right? And then the third thing, the last one in your intro is your overview. So your overview, and if you go back and rewatch this, you can probably pick these pieces out now within this presentation. I told you, here are the things we're going to do. And that's really all the overview is there's a part of your audience that they want to, they just need to know what to expect. Some of you out there, you could care less. I wouldn't have to explain, hey, here's what you can expect throughout this next 45 minutes. But there's a big group of you out there that if I didn't share that, I'd lose your interest. Shirley, great question. So Shirley's asking, do you write it out or you just give shorthand kind of notes? So typically I do two versions of a lesson plan. The first version is a little bit more intricate, has more information in it. That is me planning out the content that I want to deliver. But that is too much to have in front of me during an actual presentation. I need to kind of look down and just glance at something that is like, okay, here's where I'm at, here's what's next. So I usually have two versions of this. I have a more elaborate version that really has more detailed content, but I still try to keep it as bite-sized as possible. And then I have kind of a presentation format that's just words that signal me into the content. Hope that makes sense. So then you go through your presentation, and your closing also has a couple elements to it. The first one is our review. So you want to somehow review your process. Review. So the way my friend Brandon at Palmers of the Soul says this is tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. It is as simple as that. Rosie, you absolutely could do them on index cards if that's something that you'd like. I usually just have a piece of paper with just kind of words that keep me on track. So the closing, that review part, if you're just doing a piece of social media context, it might just be something as simple as, hey, I hope that learning how to do short breath holds has helped you. And that might be your review. It might be that simple. But if you have the time, you have the space, this is the moment where usually, if you think about the times that you've been here with me on this program, I usually ask you something like, hey, what was important to you tonight? What did you learn from tonight? What are you taking away from tonight? And that's a review process. If it's a live class and I have time and space, I might go more in depth so we can touch back to that early pieces of content that some people are starting to already forget. Then there is another acronym, CTA, call to action, because a class is great, a presentation is great, but what do you want them to do with it? What are they actually going to take action on? Because tonight, it's awesome if you just sit here and listen, and I hope you're taking some things away. But if you really want to do something with this, if you really want to practice this, you have to take action with it. You have to do something with it to actually grow from it. And then your final thing is some type of, just wrap up or closing statement, just basically an outro. And this might, again, be something as simple as, hey, you know what? Thanks so much for watching. I'm Andrew Carruthers from Samview. That might be your outro. It might be some kind of motivational statement. It might be, again, finishing up with a story. It might be, sharing a personal testimony of what you just shared with people. But it's basically that same kind of process. So I hope that this helps, because, again, what we want to do is we want to make sure that if we are going to show up in a conversation in front of an audience, in front of our staff members at the salon, whatever it is, we want to recognize that we have an opportunity to show up heart first. We have an opportunity to show up authentically. And that is two pieces. It's that technical aspect, which we started with in the beginning. What part of the lesson plan am I in, by the way, right? What part of the lesson plan I'm in, if you know. So we talked about, I'm giving you a clue. We talked about how to build the story, how to capture the story, how to tell the story. I've given you the tools now to actually create a lesson plan that you can use. Come on, what part of the lesson plan am I in? Type it into the chat before I'm done with it. I'm almost done with it. It's the review. I'm doing the review right now because I'm talking about what we talked about. See, giving away my tools here. And what I'd love for you to do, speaking of the CTA or the call to action, is what I'd love for you to do is to give yourself a moment to actually build something out with this, to go through the process of making a lesson plan for something. And again, this could be just simply a conversation that you want to have. It could be a presentation that you want to give in front of your staff at the salon or your coworkers. It doesn't necessarily have to be in some big class on a stage. It could even just be, this could be fun too for some of you, use this for your next social media post. How do you go from open, body, close within a social media post within that course of 60 seconds? Like an actual, what do they call them? Reels or a TikTok, right? This is the structure you can use. Sorry, too busy typing to answer, right? So I hope this was good for you. It's something that I hope you can tell I'm quite passionate about, because this has been a big part of my job for a lot of different companies and for a lot of years, is to help to train other people to do these processes. And it's been something really good for me personally, because I do have to be in that place of an educator very often. So thank you all so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you're taking something away from it. And if you do build out something like a lesson plan that you're going to do on social or something like that, please feel free to share it with me. You can find me on Instagram, of course. Let me get that up on screen for you. There you go. You can find me on social, of course. You can message me through Facebook, Instagram. Either one of those is really good. And I'd love to hear what you're doing with this information.